Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right, great. My name is Mary Cordes, and I'm the Executive Director here at Hayner Public Library District. A quick word, I just want to say a quick word before Lacey does our introductions. I wanted to thank you all for coming out today. I know it was a little difficult. It's going to be 50 degrees tomorrow, so, what are you going to do? So I just wanted to say I hope you enjoyed seeing the letter this morning. If you haven't had a chance to see it, it'll be on display before you leave. And I also hope you enjoy our lecture today. We're so lucky to have the resources that we have at our library. As you can tell, I think the library is probably the best resource in our community. And Lacey's going to, introduce our speaker. But I wanted to just say a word of thanks to what I think is our best resource, which is our staff. So our staff does a tremendous amount of work here in the genealogy. We have Lacey, George today, but the staff at all of our locations. So I just wanted to send a word of thanks out to them. They do such a good job. A lot of them are behind the scenes. You don't see that. Tech services, indexing, interlibrary loan. All of these services are wonderful services that we hope you enjoy, that you take advantage of. I'll be in the front of the library, so if you have any questions about anything, if you want to register for a library card, we can do that too. So I'll be happy to do that, and I'll be up front, and if you have any questions after the program. So thanks for coming out. All right, I'll take it out of the way.
I'm not Lacey, I'm Terry Sharp. I'm president of Landmarks Association. But thanks for coming out on a bad day, and I hope you enjoy the lecture. There's another one coming up in March on the third Saturday, and Lacey will tell you about that. Thank you very much for coming.
Hi, I'll talk a little bit about the March program, and then I'll introduce Tom. So the March program, as Terry mentioned, is on Saturday, March 16th at 10 a.m. And that one's on the Gateway Arch. John Gunther will be speaking that day. He's come to the library before and done some talks. Fantastic. And he just came out with a new book about the Gateway Arch. So we're looking forward to that. And I'm just always thrilled to be able to do this lecture series with Alton area landmarks. So I'm glad that y'all are here today. I hope you've enjoyed other lectures we've had, and this will be going on into the future as long as Terry wants to keep working on it with me. So we're really happy to have you all here for that. So today we have Tom Emery, who's right here. Tom is going to be talking about Abraham Lincoln and Alton. And this is really special because he actually did this talk, prepared this talk just for us. He wrote the book, Abraham Lincoln and Alton, several years ago. And I had the pleasure of being one of the advanced readers for that. It was wonderful. It's really sort of explains all the relationships that Lincoln had with people in this area and all the things they did outside of Alton. And it was a really fun book for me to read. And so I hope you all get a chance to do that. And I am so thrilled that Tom is here. Oh, and I'll tell a little bit about him. Let's see. He's a critically acclaimed freelance writer and historical researcher. He's compiled more than 40 book and booklet titles on an array of historical topics. Articles with his byline have appeared in over 150 newspapers across the United States, including the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Omaha World-Herald, Chicago Daily Herald, and many more, including the Telegraph, and that's where I first ran into Tom's work. So it's an absolute pleasure to have him here. And he's going to try not to use a microphone, so if that doesn't work, we'll come back up and we'll fix all this, but we're going to give it a try. And so if you can't hear, we can make that happen. It'll just take a second. So, Tom, would you like to come start?
Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear me now? Yes. Everyone in the back? Okay, good deal. We're going to see how this goes. As Lisa said, my name is Tom Emery. I'm a freelance writer and historical researcher from Carlinville. So I'm pretty close to home today. We're going to talk about Carlinville here in a second, actually. Yep. I always have to ask my audiences when I speak someplace, have you heard of Carlinville? Do you know where it is? Most of you have. Yes. Why are you applauding?
$1 million courthouse.
Yeah, $1 million courthouse. I have a very nice view of that from my front window, actually. Yeah. No, everyone knows where Carlinville is. When I go to Chicago, I ask, do you know where Carlinville is? They don't know. They don't care. I get very clear. And I always get, do you have the catch a bottle? No, that's Collinsville. SIU? No, that's Carbondale. So, but I have the pleasure of going around the state doing these type of engagements. I've done about 210 of these since August of 2011. I've been as far north as east of Butte. I've been as far south as Harrisburg. I did a series of 4 in Kansas City in September 22. I've been in 4 different states. So I really have, it's always fun for me to get to do these type of things. I'm really, really happy to be here today in this beautiful venue. The Hayner Public Library is a really special place. I'm really happy that Lacey had me here to do this. And Lacey, who gave me one of my back cover reviews of my book, it's one of the many times I've enjoyed working with you. So let's hear it for Lacey real quick too. She's been great. And I also want to mention someone who's been a big support of mine, Carla Snyder, been here a number of times for me. So Carla, thank you for being here. But I'm going to be talking about my 2020 book, Lincoln and Alton. And I'll tell you later how that came about. And for those of you who've heard me talk before, I'm going to open with the sections to be pretty familiar to you because it kind of applies to several things I've done. Why I did this book? Well, there are 15,000 books I've read. I've not read that many, trust me. But there are over 15,000 books have been written on Abraham Lincoln. It's been written that the only person in world history that's been written about more than Abraham Lincoln is Jesus Christ. If that's true, that's well deserved. He's the greatest president in American history. I think he's way up here. There's not really a close second. Readers around the world are fascinated with him. He has a big following in Asia, Taiwan. There are Abraham Lincoln study groups in Europe, in England, Germany. He's appeared on postage stamps in foreign countries. He's really one of the great figures of world history, not just American history. And yet there's so much that needs to be written about him. I've been told many times that everything about Lincoln has already been written and there's no new material left. And those people have no idea what they're talking about. They really don't. Because there's so much new material, so much that needs to be covered by Abraham Lincoln, right even in our own backyards. I got to give the other person who did my back cover review, including Lacey, was my mentor, Dr. Wayne Temple from Springfield, who turned 100 a couple weeks ago. And if I called him now, I could ask him any question cold on Lincoln, he'd be able to answer it. And Doc and I talk about this all the time. There's so much about Lincoln that needs to be written about, needs to be understood. Because if you go to any Barnes and Noble or any big bookstore, so much of what is written today on Lincoln and the Civil War is just rehash. It's just recycled. There's so much needs to be written, and I'm always kind of disappointed when new books come out because it's just retread. There's so much that reprint, recycle, just say things a different way. And I think that's really unfortunate. I had a host, and I won't tell you where it was because I'm going to rip her here, so I'm not going to tell you where it happened at, who told me I was talking to her after my talk, and I'd done one of my programs on Lincoln. I do 4 different programs on Lincoln, and she says, just when you think you know everything about Lincoln, you learn something more. I thought, think we know everything about Lincoln. Got a high opinion of ourselves, don't we? Well, I was struck by that comment because first comment is wrong. Even the greatest scholars are always learning. There's always something new to learn, and it's one of the primary reasons why I do this. I love to break new ground, write about stories that need to be told, particularly on the local level. I've done several books of Lincoln of regional interest. I've since done books on Lincoln in Macoupin, Montgomery, Greene, Jersey, and Clark counties. As I was writing this book, I also did one on Lincoln and the heritage of Illinois State University, which I'll talk about a little later. As I was doing the Illinois State book, I realized I should probably do one about Alton at some point. As most of you know, I've written for a number of the Alton papers. I wrote for the Alton Telegraph for several years, so there's an editorial change in 2019. I used to write for the Godfrey Advantage. I write for the Prairie Land Buzz. And you still hear me? Everyone okay? You hear me okay? All right, good.
Can you raise the mic? Just, yeah.
Like this? No?
You gotta turn it on.
Got to turn on? Okay. Better?
Yes.
Better? All right, good. Okay. Can you hear me okay? You too? Okay, all right. I'm being filmed here. I make sure I'm being heard there too. But I realized I could probably do a book on Lincoln and Alton. And I really didn't know what I was getting into when I did. I thought I might get about 150, 180 pages out of it. I got 265 pages out of it. There's an awful lot about Lincoln and Alton that we really could understand. And I hope you think that this book is different than 15,000 Lincoln books that came before it. Okay? So let's start off, and I'm going to say this first, folks. You probably understood, it probably seen just me talking now, or if you heard me talk before, we don't stand on formality here. So if you got any questions, comments, put the hands up. And I'll say this, I really appreciate how well I've been treated here. So many of you so polite, calling me Mr. Emery. I really appreciate that, but my name's Tom, okay? My name's Tom. This is American, this is 2024. I'm Tom, okay? If I had a PhD, I'd still be Tom, okay? So please, if you have any questions or comments as we go along, put the hands up. Let's start by asking how important was Alton to Lincoln? That has to be taken in some context. Lincoln traveled across the state, knew a lot of people in Illinois, visited a lot of places. If you're trying to rank the most important cities in Illinois to Lincoln's pre-presidency or his overall story, Springfield obviously comes to mind. He lived there, right? Bloomington probably ranks number 2. Decatur's important. Then you have the debate cities, of which Alton is one of those 7. I might make the case that of the 7 debate cities, I'm not saying the debate itself, but the importance to Lincoln, Alton might be at the top of those. Because more happened here, he knew more people, he was here more often than some of the other places he debated in. He served in Congress, represented much of West Central Illinois, from pretty much the Jacksonville area up toward Pekin, and that area is his district. He rode the 8th Judicial Circuit, 16 counties in eastern and East Central Illinois. Jacksonville, pretty important, Petersburg, Pittsfield. But in my view, Alton is clearly in the top 10. And I might say maybe top 5. Cities that are the most important to Lincoln. There's a lot, and also, you have to realize, and a lot of people don't understand this, there are an awful lot of counties and cities in Illinois that Lincoln was never even in. He was never in Jersey County, he was never in Calhoun County, that's very close to home. I'm working on a book now on Lincoln and the Quad Cities, because he had many connections there. And the Quad Cities, of course, are a major metro area now, but in the 1830s, 1840s, they weren't. I only have a record of Lincoln being in the Quad Cities once. So the fact that he was here as often as he was is significant in itself, let alone all the important things that happened in Alton. Why is this? Travel is extremely difficult. Springfield is 85 miles from Alton. This is one of the few places that had connecting railroads at the time, and that didn't happen until 1852, 1853. If he's riding a stagecoach, it might take him 2 days to get here. Horseback, yeah. My hometown of Carlinville, I'm 45 miles away from Springfield. If guys are riding horseback or by carriage, they might stay over halfway, because they was just that hard to get places. Lincoln strongly supported the railroads he had here, the Alton and Sangamon, now later the Chicago and Alton, now the Amtrak Union Pacific line. The Terre Haute and Alton, which was the other railroad, which was probably more important to Alton than the north-south route. He had some legal work here. He had 19 legal cases of some kind in Madison County. He spoke here a few times in the 1840s and 1850s, most notably the debate, that goes without saying. But he spoke in the Ryder Building, we'll talk about Simeon Ryder a little later here, on April 9th, I'll let that go, April 9th, 1840. I find that interesting that he spoke 25 years to the day before Lee surrendered here in Alton. Do we know what he said here? No, because no one was covering it. And why was that? Good.
No one took notes.
No one took notes. And that happened more than you think in Lincoln's speeches. No one's taking notes. Also, too, in 1840, who was Abraham Lincoln? Nobody knew him. Yeah, he was a fourth-term state legislator. That was it. You might get a passing mention in the paper, if that. But the Telegraph spoke well of Lincoln, said he had a pretty good crowd. Said he talked about William Henry Harrison for president. That's about it. But a lot of speeches are not known by what Abraham Lincoln said. That's not that unusual. He spoke here during the state fair. How many of you knew that Alton actually hosted state fairs at one point? Most of you, I figured I'd have a pretty good crowd here. The state fair actually rotated between cities until it settled in Springfield in 1894. So you had the state fair here in 1856. You had several times. He gave an impromptu speech by the Presbyterian Church. He was here 3 times in 1858, the debate. He was here on May 18th, coming through to an engagement in Edwardsville. And then he spent the night here on September 10th, 1858, again to speak over at Edwardsville. When he spoke here for the debate, he was believed to stay at the Franklin House on State Street, and that still exists, doesn't it? Yes. Yes. He passed through several times riding the Terre Haute and Alton. So he passed through here several times. He actually went through Alton on his way to Congress, and this talks about transportation too. When he was elected to Congress in 1846, He did not have to take a seat until 1847. Now, people hop on I-64, I-70, go from Springfield to Washington, there, not too long, right? Well, back then, it was a 1,600-mile trip. Depending on how you did it, he had to come by stage down to Alton, because railroads weren't here, take a steamboat, down the Mississippi, around to Carroll, up to Louisville, go that, So, it was a grueling trek. But again, he was through Alton at the time. And I do want to say, for some of you who are history aficionados or like to have a connection to Lincoln, and I don't want to argue this with you, I say that as nicely as I can, because I don't want to have any debates with people or come across as a know-it-all or come across as I know what's going on down in Alton and you don't. I don't like when people come to Carlinville and tell me that. So I don't want to offend anyone when I say this. He may have been in Alton more times than we know. There are people who say, well, my great-great-great-grandfather said the Lincoln stayed in our house. Well, he might have. If I don't have proof, I'm a professional historian. If I don't have newspaper references, documentation, letters back and forth, I can't really go with that. Most professional historians can't. I'm not trying to run down anyone's family history. So that's why I said I don't want to offend anybody. And people are smiling. Thank you, folks. I'm glad I didn't tick you off saying that. Okay? Because I really worry about that when I go out of town and talk about Lincoln. We don't know when he came through here. He may have got out of the stage or got off horseback, got out of the train, had a cup of coffee with the locals, shot the breeze with them for several hours. We can't prove that. So we don't know exactly how many times he was in Alton. We know several times, which still puts you ahead of most places, trust me. But there may be more. And I want to say that first off. Okay? Lincoln would have seen Alton in pretty important terms for many reasons. Its size, for one thing. In 1830, what do you think the residency of Alton was? What was the population of Alton in 1830? Give me a shot here.
2,100.
I got 2,100 here. It's not an auction, folks. You can say whatever you want. I got 2,200 here. Going once, going twice. 2,500 here. All right. What do you got from the back row back there? Any guesses from the back there? 10,000? I got a 3-year-old back. Is a 3-year-old still here? Is she? She's gone? Okay. She is a little cutie. That's one of the youngest audience members I've ever had. Any other guesses? These two are at closest, 2,222. In 1860, it was still the 10th largest city in the state at 6,300. So it's quite a bit of population, and that translates to political pull, doesn't it? The prison, very important down here. Yeah, the penitentiary and the wartime prison too, both of them.
Of that population, I understand that Chicago in 1830 was 300.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that says something wrong.
It absolutely does. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it says how important Alton was for a long time, and remained for many decades, but certainly in the early part of Alton's time and the early part of Illinois statehood says how important Alton was. Yes, absolutely. Yep. The river frontage, you got great transportation here. The railroad's coming through here. The infrastructure's pretty big. The fact that Alton made a bid for the state capitol, as most of you know. How many knew that Alton shot? Yes. I'll tell you that very quickly. And Lincoln would have voted for this in the state legislature. By the 1830s, the state was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with Vandalia. Didn't like what was going on there. Vandalia, I really like because it has such history, but in the 1830s, many people say it was a dirty, rather seedy place. So there's a movement to try to get the state capital out of there. Springfield jumps in, Peoria, Jacksonville, Alton, and one place in the center of the state which is called the geographic center of the state, and that's the exact phrase, geographic center of the state. Some people say it may have been Illiopolis, between Springfield and Decatur. But that word geographic center of the state was what they voted on, as crazy as it sounds. The legislature put this to a vote of the people. In 1834, in a referendum, a non-binding referendum, which was sent to the people of Illinois, Alton won. Alton was number one, the pick of the people. And of course, legislatures didn't listen to that. Do they ever? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, you could have the state capitol for better or worse in Alton. And particularly in this state, that may be worse. But each city makes its own pitch. Alton, one of the biggest draws to Alton is the big river transportation you have here. Springfield thought they had river transport until they figured they couldn't sail steamboats up the Sangamon River. How they didn't know that to begin with, I don't know. But Springfield made the best bid, $50,000 and a nice site for a new state capitol building. Lincoln is voting for Springfield naturally because he's from that area, even before he lived there. So in the 10th General Assembly, we'll talk about it a little later, one of the biggest collections of star-studded talent in Illinois political history that screwed the state up worse than most collections ever have, they voted against Alton, so Springfield got it. But the idea that Alton made a bid for the state capitol tells you how important it was. Not question. He kept a very close eye on politics here. Lincoln knew exactly what was going on in every part of the state. Doesn't matter how small it was, he knew exactly what was going on here. He knew what the Alton Telegraph was saying about him. Not question. And the Alton Telegraph, one of the oldest papers in the state. So he knows what's going on here. The prison, he had always had that in his mind. He freed or pardoned a few prisoners here through the Civil War, and worked for, when it was the old state pen, he worked for some of them to be pardoned through various channels. A lot of people don't realize this. Lloyd Tillman, who was Confederate Brigadier General, was captured at Fort Henry. He's one of the highest ranking officers you have here, was exchanged for John Reynolds, who was one of the stars of the first day of Battle of Gettysburg. Lincoln supposedly wanted Reynolds to command the army at one point. Yeah, he died on the first day. Yeah, he died on the first day. Yeah. But Lincoln had reportedly interviewed Reynolds about a month before to offer him command of the Army of the Potomac, and Reynolds, I guess, turned it down because he didn't want everything went with it. But I think that's kind of an interesting tie, too. One of the Confederate generals held here was exchanged for Reynolds. I find that very interesting. There are several visits, notes, and very close friendships. He had some very unusual experiences in Alton. One of my favorites, when he represented a Shakespearean actress who fell through an old cellar door. Yes, yeah. Mary McCready, a New York actress, she apparently falls through an old worn-out cellar door. She suffers injuries, she claims, to her back, leg, and ankle. She sues for $20,000 in damages. In the 1850s, this is a big amount of money. But she wants a lot. Talk about your personal injury attorneys, in this area. This is starting off that. Well, Joseph Brown, who had been mayor of Alton and was later mayor of St. Louis, he represents the city because the actress is literally suing the city over this because of the conviction of sidewalk. Lincoln represents the actress. They negotiate down to $1,500, trying to get this settled out of court. And Brown goes, if we get $1,500, can we have her damaged limb? Lincoln goes, well, you're not married, you're a pretty good looking fellow, for that amount you can have the whole woman. The jury only awarded $300, actual medical expenses. They were selling July of 1858. That was settled just before the start of the debates. And something I always find interesting in Lincoln research is what Lincoln was doing around the famous times in his life. What he was doing around the time of those debates, the times of the election. Because his daily life was still going on. And I think that's a good example of that.
What?
Please.
I thought it was Joseph's brother George T. Brown that was the mayor.
I thought Joseph was, but I may be wrong.
Well, because George never married.
No, yeah.
I think Joseph did.
Well, okay, yeah, but at least that's so the story goes. The source I had on it. So Joseph wasn't Joseph a sergeant at arms, U.S. Senator?
George.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, George. Yeah, right. Okay. So, but very few people have researched that. Again.
I portrayed him in Vintage Voices.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
I portrayed him in Vintage Voices.
Do you really? Okay. All right. Good deal. Remember I said about a lot of Lincoln's never been covered? Alton's a very significant part of the Lincoln story in the pre-presidency. A lot of good stories, a lot of information to tell. I want to talk about it a little later on. And I want to say, I hope I can keep this in about an hour 15 minutes. I never rehearse my talks because talking to a wall just doesn't do a whole lot for me. So I'm either crazy, stupid, arrogant enough to take it out on the road and break them in. So you're the guinea pigs today, too. So if it goes over an hour 15, you're to blame because you're the one asking the questions, okay? Do you have any questions or comments before I go on? Everyone still hearing me okay back there? You okay? I got the guy in the red back there. He's kind of the bellwether. Make sure I got thumbs up so he can hear me. Filmer, you okay there? You okay? All right, good deal. I got thumbs up there. All right, good deal. Any questions before we go on about some specifics? Let's talk about the duel, or the almost duel that's happened here. Yeah, and people want to hear about that. Lincoln was challenged to a duel in the fall of 1842 that almost, and I say almost, took place in this area, the Alton area. He was challenged by James Shields. an Irish-born political rival. Had it not been for challenging Lincoln to a duel, James Shields would be remembered as the only man who served in the U.S. Senate from 3 different states, Illinois, Minnesota, and Missouri. We don't remember him for that today, though, do we? Because he's the guy that challenged Lincoln. He'd been a Democrat in the House, that famous 10th General Assembly. He served with Lincoln in the House. He was, at the time he made the challenge, I believe he was state auditor. He's a hothead. He seems to be a political animal who always finds his way into politics and does not do particularly well at any of them. Because when he served from the Senate from Minnesota, he only served 10 months, did not get reelected. In Missouri, he served a 5-week unexpired term, didn't get reelected there either. So he's finding ways to get into office. He can't stay in office, but he keeps finding ways to get in. But in 1842, there are a series of letters into the Springfield papers signed by someone named Rebecca, one which called Shields, quote, a conceited dunce. I guess like that big pointy hat we used to see in the cartoons. Yeah. Well, he's not happy about this. A second letter said Rebecca claims that she could fight Shields if he wore petticoats and she wore breeches. That letter was written by Mary Todd and her high-spirited friend Julia Jane, who married Lyman Trumbull from Alton. Okay? Well, this just throws Shields over the edge. He challenges Lincoln to a duel. And dueling is much more common at that time than you may think, because it's always a matter of honor. Okay? You said something humiliating me. You challenged my manhood. You challenged my masculinity. You challenged my intelligence. Duels are fought over all sorts of different things. And it's stupid, of course. It's obvious. And I think what's even dumber is you had to have a second to do this. Yeah. You know, that guy, that's the one I feel most sorry for. Because let's say a buddy of mine says, I'm going to fight a duel, I want you to be my second. I don't think so. I'm not going to do this. But at any rate, they agreed to meet, not in Alton, but near Alton, on September 22nd, 1842, at a place called Bloody Island. Bloody Island's in the Mississippi River. And we can debate this, and I'm happy too, because there's a lot of debate as to where it was. Some people say that Bloody Island, what used to be Bloody Island, part of it's now under the Poplar Street Bridge in St. Louis. Okay. That is actually a renowned dueling spot. One of the famous, Thomas Hart Benton, the 5-time U.S. Senator from Missouri, fought 2 duels there. 2 future Missouri governors, Thomas Reynolds, who claimed the actual governorship of Missouri as a Confederate, and B. Gratz Brown fought a duel there. Nicholas Biddle's brother, he's president of the Bank of the United States, fought a duel there. The first Secretary of State of Missouri, I think, fought a duel there. So it's a pretty renowned dueling spot. It's important where it is because dueling is technically legal in the state of Illinois at the time. So you don't necessarily want to do this on Illinois soil. So they're going to go out to this island. Lincoln, because he's the guy who got challenged, gets to pick the weapons. This is another thing that's nice too. I got challenged, I got to pick the weapons. He chose broadswords, knowing he can't compete with shields with pistols. Lincoln is not really a marksman. So he's got Lincoln's 6'4", Shields is about 5'9", thereabouts. He's quite a bit short, so Lincoln maybe can't compete with him on broadswords. Literally what I was thinking. So he gets his traveling party together. He's got several guys now. One guy in Lincoln's traveling party later was Assistant Secretary of the War for the Confederacy, Albert Bledsoe. Yeah. Bledsoe lived with Lincoln and Mary Todd lived just down the hall from Lincoln's at the Globe Tavern, where Lincoln's lived before they bought the house in Springfield. It's been said that Bledsoe's wife helped deliver Lincoln's first child, so they're pretty close. Lincoln's got a doctor named E.H. Merriman from Springfield. He's called the bully of Springfield because he likes to bully everybody. So he's got several people in there too. They end up going through Jacksonville at midnight the night before the duel, and they get the broadswords there. So the traveling party comes through Whitehall, Carrollton, on down here. But everyone is in Alton. Everyone's out pretty much on the island at the time. Friends intervened at the last minute, and the number of friends that intervened is debated to this day. John J. Hardin, who was a prominent lawyer and congressman from Jacksonville, who was not particularly close to Lincoln, is said to have been one of them. Revel English, a legislator who was originally from Carrollton, is one. Some people say Samuel Buckmaster, the prison warden, stepped in. Thomas Hope, a kind of fire little Alton doctor. Some sources, and I try to cover these because there's some debate on this, so I'm not saying everything's ironclad, and I try to write as such in my book. Said that Hope tried to talk Shields out of it before he finally said, "Jimmy, you blanky blank little whippersnapper, I'll throw you, if you don't shape up, I'll throw you my knee and spank you." Shields apparently, according to the sources, Shields was rather put off by this. But the friends intervened. It's called off at the last minute, much to Lincoln's relief, because he never wanted to do this to begin with. And Mary Todd, I guess, was terrified over it, because they got married 6 weeks later after the supposed duel. Lincoln never spoke of it again, and I guess told Mary Todd, "We will never speak of this again." Part of it, he's actually, and if you think about it, he's actually defending her honor because she wrote one of those letters. Okay? It's been written that Lincoln and Shields were friends afterward. I don't buy it. I don't see that happening. I've read that they were joking around as they got off the boat back to Alton. I don't see that one either, frankly. But Lincoln did appoint Shields as a brigadier general through the Civil War. Shields was a Democrat. He was trying to Lincoln was known to appoint Democrats to positions to keep them happy. He was also Irish. Think about the big Irish bloc. So Lincoln's going to use him politically. And we're going to talk about Lincoln using people politically later on here too, okay? The Lincoln Shields access area across the Clark Bridge is kind of in that honor, but again, it's not really near bloody honor, okay? Any questions go on before we talk about Lincoln and love, or supposedly? Yes, sir.
There's a local story that when the boat came back and arrived here at the riverfront, that they had covered Lincoln's body up with a tarp, and then he raised up. Everybody thought he was dead, and he raised up. I don't know if there's any truth to that story, but that's one that's been circulated around for years.
An awful lot of things arose from that, which may or may not be true. And I say may or may not. Yes, ma'am.
So, you referred to Mary Lincoln as Mary Todd, and 6 weeks before their wedding, she
Yeah.
was. And then after they're married, you referred to her as Mary Todd, and Mary Lincoln.
Mary, I didn't hear all that, ma'am. The last part of it, could you repeat that last part?
You said Mary Todd wrote the letter.
Yes.
Okay. After she's married to Lincoln, how do you reference her? You reference her as Mary Todd Lincoln, Mary Lincoln, or Mrs.
I reference her, but I use actually all three. A number of people do. I usually call her Mary Todd, just kind of set her, so I don't repeat the names, but I call her all three, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and if you think about it, I've never been asked that question before, and it's interesting because I think if you called her Mrs. Lincoln, that was what she wanted to be known as the best, because she's so proud to be his wife and proud of the position. So that's an interesting question. Thank you. I'm always happy to talk about Mary Todd. Yes, sir.
I've heard that there were so many books written about Lincoln, a lot of them right after he died, and everyone came out of the closet, made up stories on that he was in my living room one time.
Thank you.
How do you really can't use those as sources?
Not very often.
They were not foundation.
They were not. Yeah. That's another interesting question right there, because many people, and I mean many people, exaggerate their relationship to Lincoln. If I had $1 for every time in an obituary I've read that someone was a warm friend of Abraham Lincoln, I'd actually be doing this on Zoom from my home, my 6-bedroom home in the tropics. Trust me, because that happened so many times. Lincoln actually had very few close friends. A lot of people said they wanted to be close friends to him, but they really weren't. I've read an awful lot, and that's something else too. I've read people who claim that they actually helped Lincoln shape national policy. I've heard people take credit for the Emancipation Proclamation. That sounds nuts. I've read that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's you really have to take that with a grain of salt with all of those things, because
even his business lawyer partner Henry wrote a book.
William Herndon. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That Lincoln's third law partner, William Herndon, who's his law partner from 1844 to 1860, wrote a book on Lincoln, which is it's really good because it gives a day-to-day look at the inside life of Lincoln, like in the law office, and that is very, very good. But of course, Herndon blew his relationship up to Lincoln and ripped Mary Todd to shreds as well. Yes, and thank you, because he's doing Herndon was a drunk. Yeah, so go ahead and do that for the crowd again. Yes, there you go. Yeah. Thank you. I hate William Herndon. I just hate William Herndon. As a professional historian, you're not supposed to. But yeah. Yes, sir.
Chicago's very hot.
I'm going to talk about that here in a second. In my next section, I'll talk about this specifically. Yes, ma'am.
I had heard that when it came time for the duel, that Lincoln being 6'4" and this great big sword, he just kind of reached up and lopped off branches.
And scared Shields out of it? Yeah, I've read that too. Yeah. Yeah. So. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, this gentleman was asking about Mary Todd's relations with the Edwards family of Alton, which we'll talk about a little later. This lady was talking about, she had heard through the Lincoln-Shields duel that Lincoln, being long-armed, took one of the broadswords and kind of lopped off some branches above to kind of scare Shields out of it. That's something I've heard too. Yeah, and I'll try to repeat the questions. Thank you. I normally do that, so I'm sorry I haven't. Yes, ma'am.
Quickly, isn't there a book entitled Lincoln Didn't Say That?
Yes. Yeah. 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 She's asking about a book. Lincoln didn't say that.
Yeah.
Okay. And that happened quite often too. Yeah. Let's talk about Lincoln and love, and I don't think he was in this case, but we'll talk about it anyway because it ties into Alton. That is a young lady named Matilda Edwards, who is a supposed love interest of Lincoln, and this will get into the Edwards we talked about. She's the daughter of Cyrus Edwards, a politician and landowner from Edwardsville and Upper Alton. Cyrus Edwards is a brother of Ninian Edwards, the 3rd governor of Illinois, and the territorial governor of Illinois. Ninian's son, Ninian Jr., marries Mary Todd's sister, Elizabeth Todd. Yeah. So that's how the Edwards are tying in here. Yeah. And I'll say this, because it ties into Matilda. I'm not getting off the track here. The Edwards home, Ninian Edwards Jr., his home and Elizabeth's home in Springfield is kind of the social center of Springfield. All the young people of prominence are hanging around the Edwards home. They go to balls and different functions there. If you're part of it, they called it the coterie. If you're out on the outside, they call it the Edwards clique. Okay? But this kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about here. Okay? There were actually 4 Todd sisters in Springfield one time or another. Elizabeth was there first. They sent for Mary. What they would do is they'd send for one, get her married off, send for another one. So there are 4 Todd sisters in Springfield one time or another. Okay? But Matilda, she moves with the family to Upper Alton in 1837. She's 15. By the late 1830s, she's in Springfield. She's part of the coterie. She's living in the same house as Mary Todd Lincoln. Okay? Ninian Jr.'s house. All right? Matilda is described as tall, bright, and strikingly beautiful. And apparently any guy with a heartbeat has it bad for Matilda. How many marriage proposals do you think she supposedly received? How does 22 grab you? Yeah. Among the many men who want Matilda bad is Joshua Speed, Lincoln's close friend from his early days in Springfield. I will read you what Joshua Speed said about Matilda Edwards. She had 2 clear blue eyes, lips so fresh, fair and lovely that I am jealous even of the minds that kiss them. A form as perfect as Venus, mind clear as a bell, voice bewitchingly soft and sonorous, with a smile so sweet, lovely, and playful. Get a room. I mean, that's way over the top. But that's how the men look at Matilda. Yeah, because she was really good looking. Lincoln and Mary Todd, the Lincoln and Mary Todd, they'd met at the Edwards home in late 1839 when Lincoln said to Mary Todd, Miss Todd, I want to dance with you in the worst way. If you know anything about etiquette at the time, women, when they go dancing with these big ball gowns, wear these little dancing slippers, and he scuffed them up terribly because he stepped on her feet the whole time. One of her girlfriends said, well, how was it, Mary? Was it the worst way? Mary goes, yes, it was. The very worst. But that started an on-again, off-again courtship, a very intense courtship that lasted till their marriage in 1842. They broke up on what Lincoln called the fatal 1st of January, 1841, which Lincoln said he was the most miserable man living. Some think Matilda had something to do with that, but Lincoln may have had it for her. I don't, frankly. A couple of Lincoln's friends swore that he was in love with her. Orville Browning, who was a U.S. Senator from Quincy, James Conkling, who was a prominent Springfield local politician, swore that. Matilda when asked about later on, said, was Lincoln in love with you, seemed very surprised at the notion. She said, he never paid hardly any attention to me. But that has kind of persisted for a while, and it's debated among Lincoln scholars today. I mention it because it's an Alton tie. And I can tell you one reason that I think that they weren't involved, because Mary Todd liked the woman. Now, Mary Todd, who I could talk about here till midnight. I talked to Carla's DAR group about Mary Todd one time. Yes. I make no bones about it. I'm fascinated with Mary Todd Lincoln. I'm sorry? No, go ahead. You're fine.
I just said she could hold a grudge.
Yes, she could hold a grudge, big time. And that's one reason I think that Matilda, because for one thing, she's living under the same roof with Matilda. Two, she speaks well of Matilda in letters. This would not happen if she saw her as a romantic rival. Okay? When Lincoln was in Congress, I mentioned that a few minutes ago, Matilda, and I talked about her husband, because he ties into Alton too. Matilda and her husband happened to be in Washington, and Lincoln and Mary Todd seemed very eager to see them, to meet them again. This would not have happened if Mary Todd would not have allowed this, because she would ban Lincoln from speaking to certain women because she was insanely jealous of Lincoln. So the fact that Mary Todd, like Matilda, says that Lincoln was never involved with Matilda. Okay? Every other man wanted to be, but he was not. Yes, sir.
Who was your husband?
Newton Strong. He had been an Alton lawyer. He's a rather prominent Alton lawyer. He came here from Pennsylvania, landed in St. Louis, and pretty much heard that there was opportunities for legal work in Alton, so he came on to here. He lived in Alton from 1834 to 1836. He was actually connected with Lincoln on 13 different legal cases, so they knew each other, fairly well. Newton met Matilda in 1840. They married in 1844. In 1846, they moved back to Pennsylvania, where Matilda died at the age of 29 in 1851.
From childbirth?
Pardon me?
From childbirth or complications?
I believe I've read that one time. I don't know that. I can't say off the top of my head for certain. Yeah, but she only lived to be 29. Lincoln's relationship with Matilda's father is interesting too. Cyrus Edwards, we mentioned there. He was, as I mentioned, young brother of Indian Edwards. He was a large landowner, two-term state senator who had served with Lincoln. He lost in the 1838 governor's race to Thomas Carlin, who my town is named for, and was pretty prominent. Lincoln and Cyrus are quite close, even though Cyrus is a pro-slavery man. He was one of the people who helped Usher Linder overrun the Lovejoy and abolition movements. Lincoln writes, he says that his relationship with Cyrus is, quote, one of my most cherished friendships and one of my most highly valued friends. Lincoln, though, never put friendship above politics. And when I say things like this, I kind of shock some people. I don't mean to, because I think Lincoln was a very good soul, but Lincoln was a political animal, and that often came first. And I got the heads going up and down there, because you all know it. Yeah. Okay. In the late 1840s, Lincoln is being besieged in Congress for the right endorsements for the position of the Commissioner of the General Land Office. At this time, much government land is still being sold in America. A lot of it hasn't been settled. There are 10 land offices in this state which handle all government land transactions. Edwardsville was the busiest one of those 10 for several years. Okay? But the position of the General Land Office, that's something everybody wants. One thing pays $3,000 a year. Big money in the 1840s. Two, you're controlling all the land of the West. So you got some political pull. This is a position people want. Cyrus Edwards wants this position. Moved to Washington to take this. Well, he thinks he has Lincoln's backing. And Lincoln seems to back him early on. Then Lincoln starts seeing some of the other candidates that don't seem too promising to him. And Lincoln comes up with a person that might be better in the position to be the commissioner. Himself. So he actually starts rounding up support statewide to try to get endorsements to become the commissioner of the General Land Office. He cuts out Cyrus, is what he does. And that caused a rift that lasted for a decade. I've read accounts that tell me that they actually didn't heal up till about 1858, around the time of the debate here. So Lincoln could do that to people. Doesn't make it sound very good, but that's who he was. Because people don't realize what a brilliant politician Abraham Lincoln was. Any questions before I go on? You hanging with me okay? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when Matilda lived at Mrs. and Mrs. Ninian Edwards' home.
Yes, in Springfield?
And Mary lived there at the same time.
Yes.
And was that in 1837, 38?
1838, 1839, long in there.
And so what were the age differences between Mary Lincoln at the time and Matilda? You said Matilda was 15.
Around the time that Matilda lived in Springfield, she'd been about 18. So that puts her at about 1820, born in 1822, I believe. So she was around 1839, 1840, she was about 18. Mary Todd was born on December 13th, 1818. So she would have been about 3 years older, three and a half years older, because she was 2 months shy of 10 years younger than Lincoln. So.
And are there any letters where Mary Lincoln seems annoyed with Matilda after the breakup?
I have not seen one. She speaks well of Matilda in letters. Talks about she's a lovely girl and speaks very well of her. And Mary didn't just put on an air. If she didn't like someone, she'd pretty much come out and say it in very catty terms. So I'm not aware of any. Good questions. I figured I have a well-read group down here today. Hang with me, okay? Okay. The debate. I think the Alton debate. Many people have said that the Alton debate was not one of the stronger ones for rhetoric or oratory, and it probably wasn't. But there's several unique features of the Alton debate which I find fascinating. I want to talk about those today. There was the final one of the last of the seven. It was on October 15th, 1858. It came after, in order, Ottawa, Freeport, Jonesboro, Charleston, Galesburg, and Quincy. Quincy was 2 days before. Lincoln and Douglas actually came down on a steamer from Quincy. This is the only debate in which they arrived together before. They arrived in the city of Louisiana, and that boat's got some pretty good history here too, going back to the Civil War as well. Lincoln stayed at the Franklin House, I mentioned that. Douglas stayed at the Alton House, which I believe is the corner of Front and Albee, I believe. It was a cloudy day, but it's a big deal in town. Why is it such a big deal? Well, for one thing, it's the only look a lot of people get at these candidates. Because photography is still in its infancy. Now, of course, we know what Trump and Biden and all those people look like, right? Well, back then, technology to reprint images in newspapers was still in its infancy. So a lot of people were voting for someone they didn't even know what they looked like. Okay. Even there was media coverage, big media coverage, Chicago papers statewide over here, there's statewide hype. You didn't have as big of a crowd as you might have thought. We'll talk about that a little later. But people are coming in from the steamer in St. Louis for $1 a piece. They're coming down the Chicago and Alton Railroad for a half fare. Mary Todd comes to town for this. It's the only debate she actually attends, with her son Robert, who's a part of a student guard, kind of a ceremonial guard. It wasn't a huge crowd compared to the other debates. About 5,000 people here. At least most estimates say that. Some of the earlier debates, Ottawa and those places, were drawing 15,000, 20,000. There's been several. Go ahead.
Was it one of the last debates chronologically? Where did it fit?
It was the last debate.
The last one.
Yeah, the last one. Yeah.
Maybe a little hard.
Yeah, it was the last debate.
And how far before the election was
A lot of people don't realize at that time, Illinois and many states could not select their own senators. They were selected in the legislature. So you didn't actually have an election day like we know it today. But it would have been first week of November. It would have been, the date was like November 3rd or 4th, so it would have been about a couple of weeks ahead of time, 2.5 weeks ahead of time. Yeah. Thank you.
Whatever political party controlled the legislature,
Right.
choose
Yeah.
the Senate.
Yeah. And since the Democrats controlled the legislature, that's how Douglas got in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Illinois did not have a direct election of U.S. senators until 1913. That came with the 17th Amendment. So, and the 17th Amendment was actually brought on by part of it was brought on by an Illinois senator being removed for misconduct, William Lorimer. Something else we can be proud of in this state. Trust me, folks, I've read about it. Won't take a shower half the time after I do read about the Illinois political history, but there you are. At any rate, but Mark Neely, who is a foremost Lincoln reference historian, said that he believed the debate was kind of anticlimactic because novelty may have worn off because it was later in the schedule. Both candidates had been on before, like we said, so maybe the newness wore off of the battle as well. We watch those presidential debates today, and the presidential debates really mean nothing in terms of who gets elected today, but they last, about an hour 15? Okay. A debate at the time is an all-day affair. The one guy gets a 1 hour opening speech. You heard me right, 1 hour. The next guy gets a 90-minute rebuttal. The first guy gets a half-hour answer. That's 3 total hours. It's a doing. Douglas apparently was so hoarse he could barely talk. His voice was just shot. The debate was overtly racial, as each one had been before, because they're all playing to the crowd. One of the differences in the debates is that, and Doc Temple said this, and he's absolutely right, Douglas pretty much said that blacks weren't human and deserved being slavery, and Lincoln was basically saying that he thought there shouldn't be slavery, but he didn't see blacks as equals. That's pretty much what this was. Okay? And they played the crowd wherever they were. Down in Jonesboro, guess what they were doing? Talking worse about blacks and slavery. Go up north, Freeport and Ottawa, you know, they're going to play to the crowd, because it's called pandering. Okay? Lincoln was not an abolitionist. We'll talk about that a little later on. Douglas, had Alton said the signs of the Declaration did not have blacks in mind, and he was, quote, more for the great principle of self-government than all the blacks in Christendom. He's just putting out on the line. The crowd is largely for Douglas. Okay. Lincoln rips the Dred Scott decision, says that Douglas had the tendency to dehumanize blacks, which he did. Lincoln goes out of the way to make sure that people don't think he's an abolitionist. Abolition is not a popular stance. Now today, in today's era of diversity and equality, we want to think that. But back then, abolition was not the popular view, it was not the prevailing view. And I don't mean to be insulting here, I'm just telling you how it was. I find that repugnant myself. I think we all do. But that was not a popular stance socially or politically. So Lincoln did not want to be pinned with being an abolitionist. And we'll talk about that a little later on. And keep in mind, this is a man, the great emancipator. That's how the situation was. There's a very partisan press. The Chicago Tribune talks about Douglas's mumblings and Lincoln's masterly argument. One Alton paper says, Lincoln triumphant, Douglas vanquished. Big line like that. The crowd's largest for Douglas. Many people think Lincoln had the edge in the debates, although he did not win, so it really didn't help when it really mattered. Lincoln, after the debate, said, I now sink out of view and shall be forgotten. Yeah, that really happened, didn't it? Well, Lincoln, among other things, was collecting newspaper clippings and writings about those debates, which he put in book form, which was a wildly popular seller and helped actually introduce him nationally. The debates were not just a state thing; they were Illinois, U.S. Senate position from Illinois, but they had national backing, and that really helped launch Lincoln nationally. I don't think the Alton debate was one of the strongest debates, but there are so many nuances to that one. I find it very interesting, and I think it had things that other debates didn't have. Any questions or comments before I go on? Yes, sir.
Was interesting your comment about most of the people here in Alton were screaming and yelling for Douglas. When the C-SPAN recreated the debates here, I was the guy that was supposed to rally the crowd for Douglas.
Really?
It was like beat the dead horse. Because everybody wanted to cheer for Lincoln because of what happened afterwards, but it was very true. The debates, most screaming and yelling was for Douglas.
Yeah. I personally, and I said this years ago, Douglas is a jerk. He realized he's not a likable individual at all. He's very rude to people. He's very arrogant. He's overly racist. There's a lot about Douglas I just can't stand, personally. Lincoln and Douglas are forever intertwined, but Douglas was just, I'll tell you, when I get to the Lyman Trumbull section, I'll tell you things about Trumbull. Douglas was just not, he was a brilliant politician, let's just leave it there. Yeah.
Well, the reason you had 7 debate sites was in the 7 congressional districts, and they would go south, north, south, north, and I don't know if it was Douglas, but somebody accused Lincoln of being two-faced because he would say one thing in northern Illinois and say something different in southern Illinois. And Lincoln's response was, if I was two-faced, why would I have this?
Yeah, they were pandering. They really were. Yeah. And Lincoln's, we'll talk about Lincoln's racial views a little later on today, and I try to do this as sensibly as I can. I've written about it to some extent. That's something that's perplexed scholars for 175 years.
He was against the expansion.
Yeah. Douglas was going popular sovereignty, and and Lincoln was speaking against that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Yes.
When was the Cooper Union address?
Cooper Union was in June of 1860, I believe. That which helped introduce him to Eastern Republicans. Yeah. Yeah. It was after that. It was in.
That's when he did something national.
Yes. Yeah. The debates helped launch him into the national, but the Cooper Union speech really helped him with Eastern Republicans. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Has the text of the debates been published in some?
There are several texts of it. Lincoln, the collected works of Lincoln has that. Several places do have that. Harold Holzer, who is a brilliant Lincoln researcher, has written some very extensive books on the debates, and they're very good.
Do you know what percent of the vote Lincoln got for the senatorial election in this area?
Like I say, it was not. We didn't have the popular vote. I think he lost 54-46 in the legislature, since we didn't have popular vote at the time.
54-46?
Yeah, I think it runs like 54-46 in the legislature, something like that. Is that what I thought? Yeah. Yeah, and we'll talk about Lincoln's popular vote in the presidency here a little later. Yes.
During the debates, there were reporters, I don't know how they did it, recorded it almost word for word, and then they would telegraph it to the different cities around the country.
Right.
And during the C-SPAN, I had to know when I was to get people rallied up for Douglas, and there was another guy on the other side for Lincoln. We could never figure out when it exactly happened, but I remember we had a book. We had a book that was word for word what the debate was. To my students, my sharpest students as a teacher, one was assigned to the Lincoln guy, one was assigned to me, and he was sitting up front. And whenever there was supposed to be big thunderous applause for Douglas, he raised his hand. And then I went, yay, for Douglas. So it was, there was a book. We actually had a book that we were following the exact words.
Well, I got Lacey hand with a hand.
Can you just adjust the microphone up a little bit or
Like
get a little closer? I think when you turn it.
Okay. Like this? Better?
Yeah.
Okay, good? Okay. This is kind of different. I'm sorry, man. We've been talking about how the crowd was for Douglas and people were backing Douglas. Are there transcripts of the debates? There are a number of transcripts of the debates that you can read. The collected works of Abraham Lincoln, which most libraries do have, and you can find that online, is a very good reference for that. And what other questions we have here? The percentage of Lincoln got, since that was not decided in the state legislature by the popular vote, I think it was like 54-46 in the state legislature that decided the election for Douglas. Yes, expansion of slavery. Douglas favored pretty much unlimited expansion of slavery based on popular sovereignty. Lincoln did not go for that. Lincoln, in his racial and slavery, very much evolved. Lincoln famously said if he could, around this time, if he could preserve the Union, and at that time and also when he was president, if he could preserve the Union by freeing all the slaves, he'd do it. He'd do it. He even talked about a containment policy. But Douglas was popular sovereignty, expand it wherever he thought people wanted it, which Lincoln did not agree. Did I say hand over here? Okay. What was that?
Kansas, Nebraska.
Yeah. Yeah. We all hanging with me? It's running along. You doing okay? All right. I'm going to talk about the Lovejoy riot very briefly. Lincoln would have likely been furious over the Lovejoy riot, and he would have sympathized with Lovejoy. But he almost never talked about it. He only spoke about it once on public, and that was a very cryptic reference at what's called the Lyceum speech, the Springfield Young Men's Lyceum, on January 27, 1838. It was a very subtle reference to it. Like I say, abolition was not a popular stance. If you remember, none of the perpetrators were prosecuted from the Lovejoy riot. Usher Linder, we'll talk about it later if we have time, actually tried to prosecute the warehouse owner and some of the others. Lincoln was pretty good friends with Usher Linder. And I find Usher Linder, I've written about a lot of people in my day, and he's probably my least favorite. I could say all sorts of things about Usher Linder, and I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm not trying to be catty about this. I'd never be asked back here because I'd be so profane with it. And I'm not really kidding with that. I've called him all sorts of names, literally. He's something you scrape off your shoe, I think, frankly. But I think one thing that's interesting is we talk about Elijah Lovejoy quite often. His brother Owen Lovejoy, who lived here for a couple of years. is, I think this says something about Lincoln's relationship with the abolitionists. He lived here for 2 years. He said, "He shall never forsake the cause that has been sprinkled with my brother's blood." He ends up in Princeton, Illinois. If you know where Princeton is, about 55 miles east of the Quad Cities. If you get a chance to go to Princeton, that is a gorgeous town. That's a beautiful place. It really is. And that was an abolitionist hotbed. William Cullen Bryan, who ties into the Cooper Union speech you mentioned there, some of his family was in Princeton. It's really something else. He spent, Olin Lovejoy spent 17 years as minister of the Congregational Church there. He's elected to Congress 4 times. Lincoln calls him my most generous friend, even though the relations were very distant. Like I say, Olin Lovejoy is considered a radical abolitionist. He says what he thinks, says what he wants to, and does not care. Okay? Lincoln was very surprised when the first time Lovejoy ran, he beat Leonard Swett, was a close friend of Lincoln for his first term in the primary. Lincoln said that, quote, turned me blind. A number of Lincoln's friends, David Davis, Ward Hill Lamon, despised Olin Lovejoy. Lovejoy, though, had much more respect for Lincoln. He called Lincoln a true-hearted man who was unterrified by power and unseduced by ambition. Interesting comments. He made a very fiery speech in Congress in 1860 against slavery, for which he was threatened, including by some members of Congress himself. Okay? Lovejoy did not care. He's a big guy, very powerful guy, so he pretty much wasn't afraid of anybody. You've seen this big, broad-shouldered, muscular guy. He said, "Nobody can intimidate me," and nobody did. He died in office at the age of 53 in March of 1864. His home in Princeton is now a local historic site. The relationship between Lincoln and Olin Lovejoy, one of the great abolitionists of all time, I think says how abolition was viewed politically in that era. But Lincoln actually distanced himself from it. Okay. Railroads, like everything else, Lincoln had politics in mind. He actually spoke very strongly and wrote several letters to the Springfield papers about having a railroad between Alton and Springfield. He actually said that a railroad would actually do more for Alton than it would for Springfield. He came around and said that. Okay? One researcher said maybe an attempt to dissuade Alton from learning the capitals. Lincoln's back in Springfield, so the researcher thinks that Lincoln was throwing Alton a carrot. We're going to try and get the capital. We'll give you the railroad. Lincoln backed internal improvements. The internal improvements era was a big plan to build infrastructure in the late 1830s. Railroads. Was that?
But he was a Whig.
He was a Whig, yes. Yeah. Internal improvements is a move to build roads, railroads, canals all across Illinois. One problem. Illinois does not have the money, the manpower, the engineering, or the supplies to pull this off. Does not matter, we vote for it anyway. And we, as a result, have a financial mess in 1840, 1842 that's really worse than what Illinois had recently. And I can make that argument until about 3 o'clock today. But Lincoln's back in internal improvements. He wants these railroads. Lincoln's one of 13 delegates in an 1845 meeting to plan this railroad, which is signed into law in February of 1847. Becomes the Alton and Sangamon Railroad. Its successors in Chicago, Mississippi, Chicago and Alton through 1947, and now it's part of Union Pacific's Canadian National Line, on the Amtrak corridor. Lincoln buys 2 shares in this railroad himself. How much do you think that cost? $2 there. Got 5 here. We're doing the auction thing again. How about the lady 3-year-old back there? What do you say? How much do you think spend these shares? 10? How about it, Carla? What do you think? 7? How about $200? $100 a piece. He bought 4 more in 1851. What did we say about Lincoln? Lincoln was not a country bumpkin lawyer. Lincoln was making some money as a lawyer. He's a corporate lawyer. We'll talk about that here shortly. When Lincoln died, his estate was valued in today's dollars at $1.3 million. Okay. He kept writing letters, and he kept talking about the railroads that connect Alton not just to Springfield but to the east, because we're building this big railroad network. Alton's going to benefit by being connected to the east. The Mississippi River to the east. Quote, the great work of connecting the Mississippi and the eastern cities. So he's got a big national scale here. Again, he's got his eye on Alton. Okay. A number of letters from Lincoln to the official segment exist. He handled 24 legal cases for that railroad, usually representing them, sometimes run against them. I mentioned the Terre Haute and Alton, the east-west line. He had 23 cases against that one. 17 in Shelby County and 6 in Coles County. Lincoln was actually a corporate attorney, mainly for railroads. Lincoln is considered one of the great railroading attorneys of Illinois of the 19th century. Then and now, he was seen that way. He'd been on the retainer of the Illinois Central for much of that time. He represented the IC in 54 cases. And one, which he had to sue for his fee on, the IC had to sue for his fee later, he got $5,000 on that one. 1856, that's a big amount of money. Yeah. And I got to talk now about the guy who the letter is to today, which I think is really great. That's the first time we ever talked when a letter's been displayed like that. Simeon Ryder. Simeon Ryder is not just prominent to Alton, he's prominent in Central Illinois. The people in Central Illinois don't know that yet, but he is. Ryder, and this is one of the interesting stories in my book, I think, about Simeon Ryder. I didn't devote as much time to him because I couldn't time to Lincoln as much, but I actually put him in 2 or 3 of my books, crazy as it sounds, because I can tie him several different places. Ryder had been a ship captain who ended up in the cornfields of Central Illinois, here in Alton. He'd been born in Massachusetts, his ancestors were English pilgrims. He'd dreamed of becoming a shipmaster, and he claimed to be the youngest sea captain to ever sail from New England. A commercial fisherman who sailed around the world and claimed to have nearly been executed in a pirate raid off Spain at the age of 22. So he's sailing the high seas. He comes back to New York, runs a commercial shipping business, and makes money. He's making some serious money here. He comes to Alton here in 1834 and becomes a pillar of this community. Builds a 3-story building downtown where the Lovejoy trials were held. Lincoln was not a part of those, obviously, but he did try cases there later on. The thing I don't think that people realize is that Ryder, because he was a railroad man, he got kicked off of the Chicago and Alton, felt like I got jilted then. He was a president of the Terre Haute and Alton Railroad for several years. He was credited with founding 5 towns in Illinois. Litchfield, Nokomis, and Irving in Montgomery County were founded all or in part by Simeon Ryder, as was Tower Hill in Shelby County and Windsor, which I think is also in Shelby County. So you've got 5 towns right along Illinois.
That Ryder building is still there, it's where my desserts is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a 3-story building at one time, now it's just 2. That building is one of the oldest buildings still functioning.
One of the main streets of Litchfield, now kind of sites, one of the big streets of Litchfield is Ryder Street, named for him. So Ryder's got some pull, and people in Central Illinois don't always know that. But he's got a story for Alton, but also for Central Illinois as well. The letter, I believe, was written on February 16th, 1844. I believe it's the only letter that exists between the two, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I'm talking about some dubious friends of mine. You still hanging with me, okay? This is running long, you okay? I'm getting little Caesars when I get done here and heading home. So. This is actually the 3rd of 4. I'm doing 3 and 4 days. I was in Litchfield on Thursday night. I go to Hillsborough tomorrow. This is my 5th of 7 I'm doing this month, engagements. So. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here. Lincoln had some good friends and some cruddy friends from Alton. One was, I mentioned before, Usher Linder. And I'm not kidding, he's a piece of scum, really. He prosecuted the Lovejoy riot. He had overrun meetings that Lovejoy had held to try to promote abolitionism. That in itself should make Lovejoy one of the great villains of Illinois history. But there's more to him, and most of it's not good, frankly. He was born in Kentucky, lived for a time in eastern Illinois, came here in 1837 as part of that star-studded 10th General Assembly. He's in this GA just for 2 months. He clashed with Lincoln in that very short time. One thing Linder tried to do is he tried to break off part of Sangamon County, Lincoln's home county, to form a new county out of it. That annoyed Lincoln. But they're still good friends. And scholars, how we don't know. Okay? But Linder resigns to become Attorney General. He takes over the Lovejoy meetings. That's way outside the bounds of being the Attorney General. He later serves 3 straight terms in the Illinois House. He waffles between political parties. He ended up going back to Democrats because Linder, and this quote, hated abolitionism. He's a brilliant orator, a great attorney, but he drinks way too much, among other things. He's connected to Lincoln on 76 legal cases. And Linder said of Lincoln, quote, God, he was funny. Thought Lincoln had a great sense of humor. Linder, after he resigns as Attorney General, settles in Charleston. And I wrote about this just recently. I wrote about this in this book. I've written about this 2 or 3 times. Linder becomes the lead attorney in what's known as the Matson slave case. This is in Coles County. Well, Robert Matson is a Kentucky slave. I'll tell you very quickly. Matson's a Kentucky slaveholder who owns land in Coles County. He brings the slaves to work the land, then take them back after the harvest. In doing so, he assured they were not permanent residents of Illinois. They're seasonal workers, so they would not fall under laws of Illinois that would free them. Okay? It's technicality. 2 of them become concerned they may be sold into the deeper South. A guy, his overseer, and his wife, the overseer's wife, that's a black overseer. I don't mean he was Michael Simon Legree. I don't mean that. But the overseer's wife is brought up seasonally. They're concerned that Matson may sell in the deeper South, so they escape. Okay. 2 anti-slavery men in Eastern Illinois help them. Matson hires Linder, who works to keep the slaves in jail under the Illinois black laws, which are despicable in their own right. But Linder approaches Lincoln to be his co-counsel, and Lincoln accepts. And this, I think, more than any case Lincoln ever tried, talks about Lincoln's adherence to the law. Lincoln was a stickler for the law, whether he believed it or not. You know, people want to say that Lincoln believed and took on a case and believed. No, he didn't. Lincoln took cases as they came. Now, of course, he's not going to favor this particular individual, but he's going to go for it because he's a stickler for the law. Here's what the law says. He's going to argue that. The case has perplexed Lincoln scholars for 175 years since. And people can't figure out why Lincoln did this, because 6 years later, he argues for a black woman who had been a domestic servant in Bandana and gets her freedom, Nancy Jean's Costa. But Lincoln is, if you've studied Lincoln's legal career to the extent, and I certainly have, not like some gentlemen have or ladies have, but Lincoln is a stickler for the law. What's the law say? That's where he's going. Okay? And I think we'll talk about Linder. We talked about him with the love dry rod. This is just another case where I say Linder, someone you scrape off your shoe, goes this type of thing. Okay? Linder, this comes no surprise. Who do you think he supports in the Senate race? Douglas. Who do you think he supports in the 1860 election? Douglas. Yeah. But Linder is not above requesting help from Lincoln, having his Confederate son released from a Union prison, which Lincoln helps with. They're quite close. How we can explain this, but Lincoln had some pretty lousy friends. And I'll tell you about another one too. Impeachment. Isn't that word thrown around quite a bit these days? If you're opponent of somebody, let's impeach them. Right? Well, one Lincoln appointee is one of the 21 men in American history been impeached on the federal level, Mark Delahaye, and guess where he lived? Yes. He lived in and out of Alton in the mid-late 1850s. He's a Maryland native, had come to Illinois by 1845, lived in Cass County, which is not too far from Jacksonville, Beardstown, that area. He later lives in Alabama, goes to Kansas, where he waffles on the slavery question. We don't really know whether he was or not against slavery. At one point, he's editing an anti-slavery newspaper. The office is ransacked. He flees back here to Illinois, comes to Alton in 1856. He lives back and forth in Alton and Kansas several times in the late 1850s. I mentioned when Lincoln was in town to go to Edwardsville, had a speech in Alton, in Edwardsville in May of 1858. Who accompanies him over to Edwardsville? Mark Delahaye, where Delahaye also speaks. Delahaye finally settles in Kansas, where he runs an ad in the Chicago Tribune with a blue chip list of legal references, including Abraham Lincoln. Okay. Lincoln, when he visited Kansas in 1859, stayed in the Delahaye home. This ticks off one Lincoln scholar says, why is he friends with a piece of crap like this? Well, some people say he had political value in Kansas, so Lincoln kept him around. Possibly. Delahaye, unlike Lincoln, is always scheming. He's writing letters, Lincoln, fight dirty, cut backroom deals, get money from someplace. Lincoln actually appoints Delahaye as Surveyor General of Kansas, then as a federal judge in 1863, which ticks off many of Lincoln's friends, some of whom call Delahaye a man of no character and a miserable man. It finally catches up to Delhay in 1872 when he's impeached on corruption, malfeasance, and incompetence. He's all said to have been drunk on the bench. No, it happened. The Telegraph, they don't like thinking much of back in Alton because the Telegraph says that Delhay will not be distinguished for anything except the free indulgence and bad whiskey. Finally catch up with him because he's impeached. He resigned for the trial. He is one of 21 men who have been impeached on the federal level, including Andrew Johnson, Clinton, Trump, and others. We have 2 of the 21 from Illinois, so we blow that curve too. Well, hang with me, okay? We're about 11:18 the time. What time we got there? I'm gonna try. How about three more sections call today? How's that sound? You okay? This is running along. Yes, ma'am.
I said yes.
Yeah, three more. Okay. I can go 4 if you want. It's up to you. 5, 0, 5. I'll do them all. I don't care. I'll talk very quickly about Lincoln's invention because that ties into Alton as well. How many of you knew that Lincoln held a patent? How many knew that Lincoln's the only president to ever hold a patent? Not very many knew. That's something a lot of people don't know. Lincoln's the only president to ever hold a patent. Yeah.
I read your article in the Advocate last week, so.
Oh, did you? Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Good deal. Read my article in the Advocate. Where was that one out of?
Clark County.
Clark County. Oh, the Marshall paper.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. The Lincoln's the only president to ever hold a patent. She knew this because she read an article I'd done on it. Yeah. Yeah, I've done a lot in Marshall. I love Marshall. It's a beautiful town. I did a book on Clark County, too. Lincoln is very interested in science and technology. He actually does lectures on discoveries and inventions. Did a big one in Jacksonville the night before his 50th birthday. All of his friends talk about he's very interested in how things work. As president, he wants to know how things work. Wants to examine those guns, know how they work. He's not really good with guns, wants to know how they work. Very important to him. Reads about astronomy, reads about geology, reads about these different things. The Lincolns are returning from his term in Congress in late 1848. He does several engagements in Massachusetts. And again, how do you get home? They actually sail around the Great Lakes to get there. Get to Chicago and they'll take the stage home from there. Okay? Well, they get to the Detroit River one day in October 1848, and this one particular ship, nearby steamer, is trapped on a shoal. So Lincoln goes back to the New Salem days, trying to float those flatboats over the Mill Dam at New Salem, among other things. How can you get that ship over a shoal? Well, what if you had a flotation device built in the ship you could pump up and just lift that ship and try to float it over? Lincoln likes this idea. He creates a scale model, a 4-foot scale model. He makes 2 models of how to do this. One is for the patent, and one he keeps for himself. We'll talk about that a little later. You probably wonder, why am I talking about this? You'll see why here in a second. He makes a demonstration in a water trough in downtown Springfield one time, where Gaius Paddock, whose father Orville lived here in Alton, talks about Lincoln doing this demonstration. Most people are not impressed. They say, oh, good, Lincoln looks pretty good. They don't believe it's ever going to work for a second. Okay? Lincoln, though, files it with the U.S. Patent Office, approved on May 22, 1849. It's patent number 6469, an improved method of lifting vessels over shoals. He never makes any money on it because he won't market it. But the personal copy of this, because he has to give one for the patent, personal copy is stored in his attic in Springfield. C.M. Smith, who married one of Mary Todd's sisters, one of the sisters Mary Todd hated. Mary Todd did not get along with her sisters very well. Found after Lincoln's death. It ends up at Shirtlift College on display. We don't know how it got there, maybe because of the Edwards family. Possibly with that. It was displayed in the Shirtlift College Library for decades. Their Shirtlift was bought out in 1957 by SIU Edwardsville. But apparently it was lost in the acquisition. So we don't know where it is today. And Doc Temple, being Doc, he says, if anyone knows, please let me know. He's 100 years old and still wants to know. But that ties, it's kind of fun tie to Alton. Very quickly, I'll say this. James Semple, who founded the beautiful town of Elsa, was a lawyer in Alton for a few years. He was tied to Lincoln on 15 different cases. Lincoln voted against him a couple times in the state legislature. I'll say very quickly, James Semple created a form of a motorized car that actually predates the cars that we know that were first patented in the early 1890s, he filed a patent in 1845 for what was known as kind of a trackless train, which he tested several times from Alton to Springfield and ran pretty well until he ran out of money and ran out of backers. Yeah, was that?
And ran in the mud.
Ran in the mud, yes. Yeah. But it performed pretty well in some tests. It was not really a car like we know. It was more like a train because you would have, it was 25 by 15 with several different, with at least 6 axles on it. The driver would be standing on the front, kind of steering it. It could pull a train. It's called a prairie train, among others. But it was an actual form of a motorized vehicle, a steam-powered vehicle. And I think that's very interesting. And if you ever get the chance to go to Elsa, stop in the Elsa General Store, and that gentleman Blair will talk to you about it. One that I think not people don't realize is important from Alton, and this is one of the most interesting people I ever wrote about, was Lewis Parsons. Lewis Parsons is the mover of armies. He's the ultimate engineer. He's the transportation guy. Lincoln and Parsons lived for several years in Alton. He was the city attorney of Alton from 1846 to 1849. Lincoln and Parsons were connected on several different cases, including Clark and Morrison versus Page et al. It deals with a promissory note. The judgment, in today's terms, was $34 million. 1.1 million times $34 million today. It was a 102-page filing. It was a 43-page answer in Lincoln's hand, which is the longest document known in Lincoln's hand today. It's actually filed in my home county. Because it's originally filed in St. Clair, they got a change of venue in Macoupin, and Lewis Parsons is part of this. Parsons involved in railroads. The Ohio and Mississippi became part of the Baltimore and Ohio system. He was appointed the head river and rail transportation of the Department of Mississippi in the Civil War early on. That stretched from Yellowstone to Pittsburgh to New Orleans. She's got the Western Theater and then some. He handles transport for Fort Donelson and Vicksburg, among others. For the year ending June 30th, 1863, Parsons is credited with moving 245,000 tons of supplies, 329,000 troops, 82,000 horses and mules, and 25,000 cattle. So he's moving stuff. He's getting the job done. Sherman logged him through the Atlanta campaign, said that in the whole time that they were disconnected from their base in Nashville, with 100,000 men and 80,000 animals, they never suffered from essential supply, thanks to Parsons. He later is assigned to command all river and rail transport for the armies in 1864. He moves one corps from Mississippi to Washington in 17 days. Grant loves him too. So he's got Grant and Sherman. He really wants promotion to brigadier general, and Lincoln did too. What's interesting is a lot of people didn't listen to Lincoln like he might have thought as president. His Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, didn't see a need to listen to Lincoln if he didn't want to. So Lincoln's writing these letters, I want you to promote Parsons to brigadier general once. I want this done. Stanton just throw aside, he didn't care. He's that way. Parsons wrote Lincoln some very pointed letters about why I've not been promoted. Tells him about the closeness there, because a lot of people couldn't have got away with that. Although poor Lincoln, one of Lincoln's biggest headaches was all the terrible letters he got from his old friends back in Illinois, because they all wanted something from him. But Parsons ends up being the president of that railroad. He sells them Flora. On the east side of Flora in Clay County, there's an Illinois State Historic Society marked with Lewis Parsons. Along with his brothers, he founded Parsons College in Iowa, which closed in 1973. Died in 1907, was buried in Bell Fountain Cemetery in St. Louis. Lewis Parsons is the most interesting person and the person's most responsible for the Union victory that you've never heard of. Okay? The last guy I'm going to talk about today is an inspiring figure. We talked about the head lice, guys like Linder and Delahaye, who are scum. Linder, here I go again on Linder. Don't get me started. Linder's, and I'm not making fun of it. Linder's garbage, really. Lyman Trumbull from Alton. To this day, I don't know why he does not get more credit for what he did for civil rights. He wrote the 13th Amendment. He wrote the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the first big congressional piece of civil rights legislation. He wrote the Freedmen's Bureau Act of 1866, which gave basic rights to freed blacks. In today's era of diversity and inclusion, I don't know why Trumbull's not so very more of a hero. I really don't. I just don't understand that for the life of me. He was Lincoln's most powerful connection here in Alton. He'd been a 3-term U.S. Senator. Very complex relationship between Lincoln and Trumbull. They are allied on many subjects, but they are not particularly close. Trumbull is a staunch critic of Lincoln, and I say this with respect to the great things he did. Trumbull is not an easy man to like, personally, and a lot of people say this. He can be arrogant, he can be condescending, he can be very vindictive. He's quite jealous of Lincoln for no other reason. I'm quoting a source here. For no other reason, Lincoln's only offense had been to win the presidency. Trumbull's good fortune, President Lincoln's good fortune kind of annoyed Trumbull. Stephen A. Douglas called Trumbull, and I quote, excrescence from the rotten balls of the democracy, which should tell you something about Stephen A. Douglas. History's not always pretty, is it? Lincoln spoke very highly of Trumbull, and actually had Trumbull review some of his speeches. Trumbull campaigned rather unenthusiastically for Lincoln in 1860. When Lincoln was elected, Trumbull supposed to say, "Glory to God, the country is safe." Well, that didn't really happen, unfortunately. But Trumbull one person says, Lincoln's mouthpiece in the Senate. He criticized Lincoln all the time as president, repeatedly. Too slow. He wants wholesale changes in the cabinet. Says Lincoln, quote, lacked the will necessary in this great emergency. But recognize how shrewd Lincoln is, because Lincoln's a shrewd, very brilliant politician. Lincoln did not just happen into things. He knew what he wanted and how to get there. I don't know why people don't understand that. His impact on civil rights is indisputable. He lived at 1105 Henry Street from 1849 to 1863. He was connected on 85 legal cases Lincoln. He sat on the state Supreme Court for 56 cases Lincoln argued. I don't understand why he's not celebrated more for what he did. I really don't. Because we can say he was not a likable guy. Yeah, well, neither was Douglas, neither was Linder, neither were a lot of people, truthfully. These are not nice guys. They're brilliant politicians.
It wasn't his first wife in the Lincoln wedding?
Yes, Julia Jane.
They were best friends
yes.
for a while.
Yeah, until, and I'll do that story a little later. Go ahead and tell me.
What was he originally a Democrat?
Yes. Yeah, he changed political parties 5 times. Democrat to Republican to liberal Republican, back to Democrats, and then it became populist.
What was Trumbull's position on slavery before the war?
It evolved, like many people did, but he was more against it than some people were, and he couldn't figure out why more people weren't against it like he was. But he evolved, but he was more consistent than some were. I'll say that in fairness. As far as Julia Jane goes, when Lincoln ran for Senate in 1858, that was not the first time he won a Senate seat. 1855, he won one badly too. He thinks he's going to get it at that time. He's running against Joel Madison, Joel Madison was the governor where a lot of our corruption started. It's not new in Illinois, folks. It's been going on for 175 years. Madison is probably the first one that does this. And Trumbull. Well, the balloting, it's in the state legislature, doesn't go in Lincoln's favor. He's worried it's going to fall for Madison, so he swings his support to Trumbull, and Trumbull gets it. That's how Trumbull gets in the Senate the first time. This causes rifts inside Lincoln's inner circle, because a lot of people never forgave Trumbull for it. Particularly Mary Todd Lincoln, because she never forgave Julia Jane Trumbull for it. So that broke up that friendship. Yeah. And Mary wrote some pretty catty things about Julia later on. 'Tis unfortunate to be so unpopular and how ungainly she was and all this. She loved her for years. But talk about Mary Todd could be very loyal to Lincoln. That's how she was. Yes?
In the display case that has the Lincoln letter, we also have a line of Trumbull documents. So make sure to look at that.
Good. Good. He's someone we should really celebrate.
I portrayed Line of Trumbull.
Did you really?
C-SPAN,
Mm-hmm.
enacted him for ever since. But one of the stories I like to tell is when, and you're right, Trumbull was really on Lincoln about the conduct of the war, and nobody really realizes that there was a committee on the conduct of the war.
Yeah, committee.
And
Yeah,
Trumbull
that was an
was
important committee.
as being chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Can you imagine being president, having to work with a committee in Congress to try to run
Right.
the war?
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing we won.
Right.
But one day, young Robert was with Abraham Lincoln, and Trumbull came in, and they had a lively discussion, and Trumbull was criticizing whatever, I was 12 or something. So then Trumbull leaves, and Robert says to his father, he says, why do you and Senator Trumbull disagree so much? And Lincoln's response, I may be paraphrasing, was something to the effect of, oh, he says, we don't really disagree, we just see things from a different perspective. You see, Trumbull sees things looking up Pennsylvania Avenue, whereas I see things looking down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree. I'll finish by asking you this. Did Alton vote for Lincoln?
No.
I got a no here. Did Alton vote for Lincoln?
It's only white men that voted.
What, pardon me?
It's only white
Well, only
men
white men
that
are voting. Yeah. Okay, so let me say, that's a good point. Did the white men of Alton, who the only ones who vote time, were they voting for Lincoln? No. He carried Alton by only 11 votes in 1860. Yeah. But he lost in 1864 with just 46% of the vote. He won Madison County by 61 votes in 1860, lost by 131 in 1864. That's one of his better showings downstate. Downstate, we don't like to give Chicago credit for anything, but Chicago put Lincoln over the top in Illinois both times. If you think of Lincoln's support as a line from Rock Island to Kankakee North, that's where Lincoln's support was in state. Cook, Kane, Kendall, DuPage, Lake, over to Winnebago County, Rockford, that's what carried Lincoln. You get further south, it gets a little dicey because Rock Island, Champaign, Knox counties, they carry him. My county didn't carry him. Most counties around here didn't. You get down to Marion, Williamson County, he's losing those counties 8, 9, 10 to 1.
He won St. Clair County.
He won St. Clair County, yeah. He won Bond County. Yeah. But because Kerner, yeah. He got blown out of Greene County, got blown out of Monroe County. Here's a good question. I asked you this real quick. This doesn't really tie into all, it kind of tells you how divided it was. In 1864, when Lincoln ran for re-election, how many votes did he carry Springfield by, his hometown? How many votes? Give me a shot. We're not grading anybody here. Got 10? Did I say 10? Got 10? 2? I got 2 there. How about the one with the 3-year-old back there? How's she doing? Well, she's a doll. She really is. She's a cute little girl. What do you got for me, ma'am? 3? He did carry it. It's not a trick question. Carla, I've asked her this before. She knows, so we can't count her. How about you? You may remember this one. How about you two? You've been really great to listen to. Got 10. I got another 10.
Yeah.
You're actually right. It's 10 votes. He only won Springfield by 10 votes. 1324 to 1314. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is it because the media was so negative?
It could. He's asked, was the media negative toward Lincoln? Partisan press is much more partisan time than could be.
I think it's a lot.
Also, too, the idea the abolition idea, among other things. Yeah, there are a number of things.
Older
Yeah.
folks is always putting Lincoln as just somebody that wrote a book and got where he got to go.
Yeah.
And then put that stuff in between.
Right.
You
Yeah.
just-
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, what was that?
Yeah, she's talking about how hard the media was on Lincoln in different places, particularly Democratic centers, and I think that's a very good point to make because much of Illinois was run by the opposing Democrats at the time. The media could be very hard on Lincoln. If you think about it, media is tough today, and journalism is non-existent today, folks, in my view. But back then it was even worse. Was that? Yeah. But this actually, he did better down here than a lot of places did. He barely lost Upwell in the precinct. He won really big in Fosterburg, won Monticello. He got blasted in Bethalto, 2-1 in 1860. He kept an eye on the Alton press, though. He always knew what the Telegraph was saying about him. And I'll say this as I close, when I conclude this, and I'll say exactly how this book came about. I actually did this book in 2020 through the pandemic. Now, to me, I know there's a hard time for many Americans, but 2020 was a great time for me because people who know me best are surprised I go out and do these type of talks. I'm not a particularly social person. I'm really not. So people say I announce, do PA at games or do this. This really goes against my personality. So for me to be home getting to write, that's a great year for me. Seriously, I mean, that's great. The pandemic's a great year for me. The first book I did I'll say very quickly, was on Abraham Lincoln at Heritage of Illinois State University. I have my Illinois State University pin here. I've since become a contract worker at Illinois State, and I'm very proud to be part of that university. You hear a lot of bad things about higher education today, but many good things go on at Illinois State, and I'm happy to be part of it. This is the most fun project I ever did, hands down. Number 2 was my Lincoln and Alton book. If I'm going to rank them in my career, this ranks number 2. Because I got thinking at that year, I thought, well, I could do something on Lincoln and Alton. And I did most of this book in the fall of 2020, actually, the new part of it. I adapted some articles. I got this done I had it done by Christmas. My printer didn't have it done by Christmas, but I had it done by Christmas. And it was a bad time for a lot of people, but it was kind of a special time for me because I was able to write things that I'm very, very proud of today. Lincoln, as you see in my book, had numerous connections in Alton. He knew a number of people here. He delivered several speeches, had several legal cases here. His experiences were unique in his pre-presidency. He kept a close eye on what was happening here. He always knew what was going on in Alton. Even in the White House, he knew what was going on here. And there are letters that prove that. It holds a significant place in the story, and it's one of the most significant cities in Illinois for its place in Lincoln history. But I will also make the argument as I'm standing here, I don't think there are a whole lot of cities in the nation that had a stronger tie to Lincoln's pre-presidency than Alton did. Not just in the state. The book is something I'm really proud of. Reviews have shown it makes a major contribution to Lincoln's state. Thank you, Lacey, for reviewing that for me. I've had a lot of people tell me how it's easy to read. The city of Alton has every reason to be proud of its connection to Lincoln. Every reason. There aren't many cities in the state or really the nation that have a greater connection to the pre-presidency, and I'm really proud to have been able to contribute to that story. So I'll do my shameless sales pitch. Unless you're Stephen King or John Grisham, we're not making big money doing this. But I'd be happy to take any questions you have. No, I don't. My business name is History in Print. You're looking at History in Print. I have no employees. I'm not set up. I do take PayPal, but I do take checks and money orders for it. So
How much are
they're $20 each.
Well, that's cheap.
You mentioned Lovejoy's brother, his relationship with Lincoln.
Yes.
Did he know Elijah?
I don't know that Lincoln ever. I'm not sure if Lincoln ever met Elijah Lovejoy. I don't believe he did. Lincoln. I'm not sure Lincoln was in Alton before 1840. But I didn't get into Godfrey much, but he had some ties legally to Godfrey and Gilman as well. And something I probably should address more in the book. I really did. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another Trumbull connection, when Willie died in the White House, Mary Todd was so distraught she couldn't attend the funeral, and Abraham Lincoln asked Lyman Trumbull to accompany him to the funeral, and then when Mary Todd came back to Chicago and Tad passed away, again, she was so distraught she couldn't attend the funeral, so Robert called Lyman Trumbull, who was living in Chicago at the time.
Yeah.
So Trumbull
Yeah, Trumbull left Alton from Chicago, yeah.
Trumbull married 2 of the Lincoln children, and Mary Todd did.
Yeah, Mary Todd was completely overcome with grief. I've always felt, I'm not sure why people are so hard on her. She lost 3 or 4 children in her lifetime, had her husband shot sitting next to her. That'd be enough for a lot of people over the edge. Yeah. Yes. I'm very sympathetic toward Mary. As a professional historian, I'm supposed to be unbiased. You understand today that I love Mary Todd and I hate Usher Linder. But I don't know how you could not hate Usher Linder, first and foremost. Mary Todd is more controversial, but I'm very sympathetic toward her. Any other questions?
And I wrote a letter to George Kern Goodwin saying, if you don't have anything better to do, Lyman Trumbull needs a new biography.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I don't know why he isn't celebrated more today. Because we celebrate different times for history, for whatever reason. And the people that sometimes we celebrate didn't do as much as people of Trumbull did to lay the groundwork for,
And roll the 1873 election.
Yeah. Yeah, Trumbull may not be the nicest guy in the world, but to be honest with you folks, most politicians I've written about are not that nice. I'll tell you very quickly about my books. This is Lincoln Alton. Some of you bought this. This is $20 and talks about a lot of things I've talked about today, actually more than I went into today. My Illinois State book I'm just showing off. That's not for sale right now. I don't have any copies of it. I've also got another one that I'm very proud of, Moments in Lincoln's Life, which looks at 57 of the most, it's a compilation of 57 articles I did that look at some of the interesting aspects of Lincoln's life, from the pre-presidency, New Salem, famous speeches, Lincoln's connection to holidays, some of his friendships. Doc Temple reviewed this one as well. I've had a number of people tell me how quick and easy this one is to read. I do a separate speaking engagement on that as well. I've been told it's not like any other Lincoln book out there, and I'm really proud to hear that because I talk about some things that most people don't talk about, and I offer some fresh angles, so I'm very proud of that. I mentioned Lincoln never been in Jersey County. I did a book on that anyway because he had a number of connections to Jersey County, so if you're from that area, I've got that. I also have a book on notable women of Illinois history. If you're into women's history, I have that with me today. Also on the Civilian Conservation Corps. You might remember the CCC, hearing about that. Built Pierre Marquette, I use a camp in Carlinville as a model for the impact of the CCC in the rural Midwest, which is one of the most successful federal government programs of all time. A lot of people like that because their feelings toward the environment and ecology, but also what government can do. And it's a photo history which I have with me. My 2 Lincoln books go for 20. The CCC goes for 15. Women go for 16. I'd be happy to sign them for whatever it's worth. And I would like to thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here today. Thank you all.